Champaign County Housing Authority has a rich history of service, 75 years to date, serving families, those families that need help and assistance, knowing that housing is the bedrock to every household.
We live in an ever-changing world, but policies, procedures are constantly changing. When the Housing Authority first came into existence, there was different goals, different initiatives, different mission statements.
The year is 1929 in America. On October 28th of that year started the period of the Great Depression in the United States, opening a worldwide economic crisis and setting the stage for the need for a national public housing. The 1930s also brought the U.S. Housing Act of 1937, which enabled the state of Illinois to establish local public housing agencies. In 1939, the Housing Authority of Champaign County came into being. A government grant gave the authority money to manage Mitchell Court and Rantoul, formerly barracks for civilians and Air Force personnel. Mitchell Court became the first family complex to be run by the Housing Authority.
We continued to strive and go forward and provide additional housing for other people in the community that were in need. Champaign County Housing Authority is very unique, very innovative, because they were the sixth housing authority in the state to provide housing for low-income people.
The Housing Authority began in a decade of the Great Depression, which dug so deep into the soul and conscience of the nation that only a world war could really make a dent in its depth.
Even now, there have been trends toward housing first, recognizing that, the basic need of housing, you need a place to rest your head in order to do any of the other things. So in order to look for a job or be able to have a place to make a meal or to take care of your children, struggling about not knowing where you're going to lay your head at night or put your possessions during the day makes it impossible to do all of those other things.
The purpose of public housing, as well as the financing and design, has changed significantly. Subsidized apartment buildings, often referred to as housing projects, have a complicated and often notorious history in the United States. While the first decades of projects were built with higher construction standards and a broader range of incomes, over time, concentrated public housing increasingly became the housing of last resort in many cities.
There was a lot of mistakes that were made where you was creating a generation after generation that was living on public assistance. We have evolved in which we are moving people from dependency to independency.
I was a resident of public housing. We stayed in substandard housing. Back then, nobody was monitoring. They didn't have to be under any strict guidelines to keep it decent, safe, and sanitary like the Housing Authority of Champaign County. So when we were old enough, she finally moved into public housing. And do you know, when she moved into public housing, it was like moving into a castle, because we were finally somewhere that was safe and clean, and it felt really good.
We are also building the type of quality houses that they can afford, and it actually raised their standard of living.
The unprecedented economic, technological, and cultural shifts rippling through America in the wake of World War II, the need for housing continued as Maurice Skelton, the first chairman of the Housing Authority of Champaign County, was continually re-elected to the post. His efforts in the cause of low-rent public housing as the war came to a close, and as local veterans were returning home, a new act was passed, the first Housing Act by President Truman's Fair Deal for the veterans in 1949. Beginning in the 1950s, high-rise building styles dominated the program. The Housing Authority of Champaign County redoubled its efforts to reduce the shortage. By 1950, plans were laid for 265 apartments for low-income families in Champaign and Urbana, Bradley McKinley and Birch Village in Champaign, and Lakeside Terrace and Dunbar Court in Urbana. HUD programs that help reduce poverty and grow the middle class help our national economy and our nation remain strong and competitive. And the need continued in the community for low-income housing sites. Beginning in 1967 was completed Skelton Place and Human Place, Steer Place in 1974, Washington Square in 1981, and the construction of 16 scattered site homes in 1975. Today, a new facility, The Havens, a housing authority of Champaign County development that will mainly serve senior citizens and people with disabilities currently living at Skelton Place, is planned for the Marketplace subdivision.
I appreciate how the Housing Authority as an organization has been able to adapt to the needs of the community and of the people throughout the years. And we're not going to be the same city we are 20 years hence. So we need to be able to look ahead and try to anticipate the needs. But I appreciate, the ability to adapt and be flexible.
Now today, when you look at the Champaign County Housing Authority, you can see it has evolved. You can see what we're creating. In 2010, the Housing Authority of Champaign County was awarded the designation of Move to Work. Move to Work allows the Housing Authority to design and test innovative local strategies for providing low-income families with affordable housing and a path to economic independence.
Moving to Work is currently the only mechanism through which public housing authorities can wholly transform housing delivery, programs, and operations.
I viewed the pictures in the past of the Housing Authority properties. The ladies had a garden party. It's like they had hats. All of them had on hats. Big old pretty hats that was full of flowers and everything. And it was kind of strange because those pictures were at least 30 years older or better. But recently, we still have garden parties. I just had a garden party, and the lady had their hats on. The hat club, the knit club, the Champaign police officers were taking the kids to the Cubs games, and back then they were doing it. They was doing that when I was the manager at Birch Village. So over the years, yes, it's been different, but the whole concept is the same: to serve and include, and to help the residents and give them better quality of life, and to do things that they may not have had a chance to do if it was not for us.
The 1960s will long be remembered for the civil rights movement and the freedom struggle. It was a departure from the previous 2 decades. The focus was now on the rights of the minority populations of Americans. This ended legal discrimination by no longer allowing racially segregated projects with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act, is a landmark part of legislation. It provided for equal housing opportunities regardless of race, religion, or national origin, and made it a federal crime to, by force or by threat of force, injure, intimidate, or interfere with anyone by reason of their race, color, religion, or national origin.
I think the difference in theory around public housing today is that more integration with the community as a whole is a better model. When you think about scattered site housing, you're really talking about integration within a community. And it's about having mixed levels of income within neighborhoods. It's about diversity of people within neighborhoods. And that's what makes for a strong community.
The 1970s rents were tied to incomes. Tenants were more often of low income, and a financing gap emerged, which led to the deterioration of many units. In the area of Spalding Park in Champaign, resistance to the idea of more housing projects for individuals with low income in the community was strong. Eventually, 16 5-bedroom, single-family houses were built for large families on lots scattered throughout Champaign.
People want a decent place to live. They want to feel safe in their community. And I think one of the things, looking at the history of housing authority, in the past, we've always built units in the low social economical part of town, where there was crime and there was violence. We have learned from that, and now when we are building complex. What we call ourselves doing is transforming the community, where we have home ownership and people that are elderly, people that are middle-aged, people that are children, and we are no longer under my administration where we will ever build a housing complex on the lower socio-economical side of town.
For decades, the emphasis was on housing for the elderly. But in the 80s, the focus turned to the expanding Section 8 rental assistance program. This popular program, which assists families with the monthly rent while under lease with private landlords, grew steadily since 1980. In 1981, a new facility called Washington Square is completed, providing new homes for the elderly, and is comprised of 104 units. In March 1988, an application for funds was approved for renovation work for 3 high-rise buildings: Skelton Place, Steer Place, Washington Square, and a major renovation to the Bradley McKinley complex received $1.8 million for comprehensive modernization. Crises characterized the 1990s, much of which related to the cost of expiring Section 8 contracts and deteriorating properties. Several new programs were designed to ensure survival of affordable units in Champaign County and the viability of subsidized housing programs. The Low-Income Housing Preservation and Resident Homeownership Act of 1990 attempted to maintain the supply of affordable housing by offering project incentives to preserve low-income rental properties. At the turn of the new century, brought major consumer advocacy initiatives to reform outdated and needlessly complex regulatory requirements under the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. HUD insured and assisted rental housing projects to promote wider affordable rental housing opportunities and to stabilize and sustain communities in Champaign County. The decade of the 2010s in housing began with the recovery of the 2007-2008 economic crisis and mortgage market collapse. The Obama administration placed a renewed emphasis on affordable rental housing policy for HACC, implementing the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative and the Rental Assistance Demonstration, aimed at recapitalizing the existing rental stock. There was a renewed emphasis on place-based vouchers and comprehensive neighborhood revitalization, while increasing mobility options for lower-income families, as well as improved coordination between programs for improving neighborhoods.
Well, I think as we look at the future for the city of Champaign, something that council has been very mindful of is making sure that we have affordable housing available. And so, for example, our downtown area has grown tremendously. It's a huge asset to the city of Champaign. But the housing costs in that area have also skyrocketed because of that. So we need housing that is affordable to the people who are working down there. And the Housing Authority is a piece of that. You don't have to live within a Housing Authority-owned structure in order to have Housing Authority assistance. And so they are a piece of making housing affordable citywide.
Today we're serving over 2,100 households, and when we build those new units, we will serve even more families. We have a number of great developments coming to fruition. Recently we broke ground on 2 developments, Bristol Place and Haven and Marketplace. Bristol is a family development with 89 units, and Haven is for seniors and people with disabilities, with a total of 122 units of affordable housing. Those 2 projects alone is close to $50 million. And then you look at the other developments we're doing. We have Pinewood, that'll be in Urbana. It's 24 units of special needs housing for people with disabilities. Oakfield Place, and that's in Henry, Illinois. That's 30 units of seniors. And we have a number of other projects coming to fruition in Urbana, Tolono, Ladd, and Monticello also.
With programs such as rental assistance demonstration, moving to work, and working with the private sector, the Housing Authority of Champaign County will continue to support the needs of all communities and their residents.
You can see how we're serving this community, the changes that we're making. 75 years ago, housing was quite different. Now it's public-private partnerships. That's the way we build new affordable housing. In the next few years, the Housing Authority of Champaign County has over $100 million worth of development coming to fruition, along with 430 plus affordable housing units to serve this community and others in the state of Illinois.